There are many who take comfort in the achievements of humanity in modern times. And then there are those who are certain we are approaching the end of human civilization. While the former see progress in today's technology, medicine, and government, the latter heed current events as predicted warnings from long ago. With the recent rebirth of Israel and the rise of groups around the world supporting a universal government and a cashless society, could these be signs of end times prophesied about in the Bible and the book of Revelations? Is it possible that demonic forces are influencing political leaders to bring these events into reality? Scholars all over the world, both biblical and secular, agree that the greatest threats to mankind include extreme climate change, threat of a nuclear war, and a totalitarian government consisting of a world dictatorship. With many of these ideas on the cusp of becoming a reality today, what are we supposed to do as individuals if, in fact, end times are near? Join me as I speak with our guest today, Troy Anderson. He is a Pulitzer Prize-nominated investigative journalist, best-selling author, and former editor of Charisma magazine, who has been exploring the mysteries of Babylon with co-author and prophecy expert Paul McGuire for their latest book, The Babylon Code. All right, today we have a very special guest. Troy Anderson, author of The Babylon Code, is here via Skype. Troy, thanks for joining us on Deviatus, and welcome.
It's great to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
So I was really excited to speak with you because I've always been fascinated by the idea of biblical prophecy being applied to modern day times. Can you give us a brief synopsis of the Babylon Code?
Yeah, I'm an investigative journalist. I worked at the Los Angeles Daily News for many years, and I was executive editor of Charisma magazine. And the idea behind the Babylon Code is sort of a traditional journalistic investigation expose combined with this exploration of this great biblical mystery in the Bible involving Babylon. And so what we did is my co-author and I, Paul McGuire, he's a prophecy expert and Fox News, CNN, History Channel commentator. And he used to have a nationally syndicated radio show called The Paul McGuire Show. And so we did over 100 interviews, everybody from Billy Graham and Dr. Tim LaHaye to Hal Lindsey and Rabbi Jonathan Cahn to secular experts like Noam Chomsky and professors at Princeton and Oxford. And, I read hundreds of books on this topic, reviewed thousands of pages of government academic documents, thousands of mainstream news stories, and tried to pull out the best evidence possible, exploring this question of, are we in the run-up to the end times super state, cashless society, and universal religion or occult-based religion that the Bible predicts? And then this is embedded within this biblical mystery in the Bible involving Babylon. And so you first read about Babylon in Genesis with the story of the Tower of Babel and Nimrod, considered an archetype of the Antichrist. And he creates essentially what's the first world government and the origins of the mystery religions. And then Babylon plays a central role in the books of the prophets, and then reemerges in Revelation as Mystery Babylon and Babylon the Great. And Bible scholars for thousands of years have puzzled over what the Apostle John was referring to, and this is considered one of the Bible's greatest enigmas.
Well, and I'd like to go back to something you said about, motivations towards, a new society. Would you consider this more of a conspiracy theory book or something entirely different?
Well, yeah, we like to say that we're mainstreaming conspiracy theories. This book was published by Faith Words Hachette. It's the world's third largest publishing house. The book has been a number one bestseller in several different prophecy categories at different times since the release of the hardback last October. The paperback is coming out this October 6th, and we delve into this whole question, this link between current events, secret societies, and end times biblical predictions, and really dig into some of these famous conspiracy theories, and of course in the book we talk about how the very term itself, conspiracy theory, was actually developed by the CIA as sort of a mind control kind of terminology. They spread these kind of concepts throughout society, trying to discourage people people from looking into what's really going on. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to dig into this. Is I've done many investigative series over the years and try to dig in and find the evidence of all these things really happening.
Well, and I like that you have a big list of not only religious leaders, but secular people as well who have helped to research this book. Who remind us who are some of the more prominent ones that we might have heard of?
Yeah, so on the faith side or prophecy experts side, I interviewed Billy Graham, and in an interview several years ago, I think he's 98 now or 97, but a few years ago I did the interview. He told me that signs of the end of the age are converging for the first time since Jesus made those predictions, and then he made a number of other comments that we put in the book. Then I interviewed Dr. Tim LaHaye, who's co-author of the Left Behind series. I interviewed him 2 or 3 times, and he actually read the book twice and made some suggested changes to help ensure accuracy, and then he endorsed the book. And we interviewed Hal Lindsey, who wrote The Late Great Planet Earth. Rabbi Jonathan Cahn wrote the New York Times bestsellers The Harbinger, Mysteries Shemitah. Interviewed Joel Rosenberg, who's a New York Times bestseller. Pastor Greg Laurie, Bible scholar Mark Hitchcock, all kinds of faith and prophecy experts. And the overwhelming consensus among all these guys, probably 3 or 4 dozen of them, is that yes, we are in the run-up to this end-time system the Bible talks about. But what's even more surprising is I interviewed people like Noam Chomsky, who's a MIT professor emeritus. Like I think the New York Times has called him the world's most controversial thinker. He's a sort of a old '60s radical. Is a genius, so I did an interview with him because he's concerned about climate change and the threat of nuclear war, and he told me that he wrote some articles about this, that he believes the world is approaching the end of human civilization. There's all these various threats, and so sort of building on that, I interviewed professors at Princeton and Oxford, other experts on the threats facing the world, and in fact, Oxford, MIT. I think it's UC Berkeley have actually created institutes to study the potential end of human civilization and what can be done to stop it from happening. And Oxford, Nick Bostrom has the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford, and they now put out an annual report listing the top 12 threats facing humanity as things like nuclear war, extreme climate change, artificial intelligence run amok, some terrible pandemic. But they also list bad global governance. In fact, they say that one of the top threats is a potential world dictatorship or a global totalitarian government. So, even people that study this at prestigious universities recognize that, there's some real potential problems in the world today.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned the creation of a global government. Some might argue that might not necessarily be a bad thing if we can all kind of come together and agree on a set of rules and governing bodies to govern everyone. Why would that be considered a bad thing?
There's many people that believe that this would be a very good thing. It's essentially it's known as globalism. You probably heard that. It's emerged as a hot topic in the campaign between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And there's globalists around the world. They have various institutes and think tanks. And there's, I heard a couple of guys that run, I think it's like the World Parliament Association. So there's these various groups, especially in Europe, or as federalist groups. And they believe that, yes, if we could create some kind of global political international system, economic, sort of join the world's religions together, we could have peace. We could get rid of nuclear weapons. We could address climate change, alleviate poverty, suffering in the world. And on the surface, this sounds like a wonderful thing, right? We could have some kind of utopia in the world and peace and prosperity and continue improving people's economic conditions. So it sounds like a potentially wonderful thing, but unfortunately, the Bible tells us that at some point, if we put this kind of system into place, which is we're in the stages of doing that now, at some point, this figure known as the Antichrist will exploit these sort of naive hopes of humanity and use, through the Bible talks about, through subterfuge or through deceit, intrigue will seize control of this worldwide system, and then all kinds of terrible things will happen during this tribulation period. So that's something we explore in the book, is and recognize that this hope of a global system is a great hope of humanity. It's existed from since the beginning of civilization. Essentially, there's been numerous attempts over thousands and thousands of years to try to do this, and it's never ended well, actually.
Okay. Well, I think I want to follow up on that a little further, but before I do, I think it's important to know how do you distinguish the difference between the term divination, as the Bible uses the term, and the term prophecy, and how would you classify, I guess, the information presented in this book?
Okay, yeah. So this is considered a prophecy book, a Bible prophecy book. I guess a divination would be people might associate that with magic or sorcery, or like a sort of a New Age kind of a belief system. And the Bible talks, warns against, divination and sorcery and soothsaying. There's a number of different terms, but they're all sort of, different things along those lines.
Mm-hmm. So in your research for this book, could you touch on some of the major parallels between the biblical prophecy presented and some of the current events you've uncovered?
Okay, well, the two major things that we talk about in the book that the prophecy experts believe are indicative that we're in the run-up to this system is, first of all, you have the rebirth of the nation of Israel in 1948. This is considered sort of the super sign of end-time prophecy, and this has been popularized in recent decades. Hal Lindsey talked about this in his book, The Late Great Planet Earth, which was a New York Times bestseller. I think it came out in 1970. He talked about the parable of the fig tree that Jesus refers to, and this has been interpreted as the rebirth of Israel. So that occurred in 1948, and Jesus talked about that the generation that saw that occur, that generation would see all other end-time events supposedly happen. And when Hal Lindsey wrote that book, he had mentioned that he thought maybe a biblical generation was 40 years. I interviewed, of course, that's all came and went. I interviewed Hal Lindsey, Dr. Tim LaHaye, and Doc Beshore, who is a fairly prominent Bible prophecy scholar. He passed away here about a month ago. And they believe that there's some verses in the Bible that talk about a generation being 80 years, 70 to 80 years, and then Tim LaHaye said maybe 100 years. So if that's the case, and this interpretation of this prophecy is correct, we're potentially somewhere in the ballpark now. And the second big prophecy that we explore in the book is globalism. This push for global governance, for global government. The book of Revelation talks about this worldwide system that will be formed during the tribulation, and the mark of the beast. You may have heard about that. Mm-hmm. At this, you won't be able to buy and sell unless you have this mark. And so today we see all these different steps being taken. We had this United Nations summit in September on sustainable development. You had the Paris climate change treaty in I think it was December, and they're trying to sort of join the world together, to address climate change, to address poverty, sustainable development, and then you got all these trade treaties and changes in international laws, and these these existing global bodies that exist. So there's this push for globalism now, and so we see those as the two major things indicating that we're in the run up to this system that the Bible predicts.
Well, now, as part of this globalism concept, you mentioned the creation of a global economic system, much without the knowledge of the rest of the world. Have you uncovered anything specifically about that with present time?
Yeah, I mean, probably many people have heard about, we're going increasingly cashless. There's different countries around the world and that are rolling out, essentially cashless kind of systems, and so it's not that most people aren't aware of that, but there's we cite several different stories. I think I quoted a bank chairman in the Babylon Code. He wrote an article for Forbes or something like that, and he said that this push towards this cashless society is happening at lightning speed, and he warned that if we put this kind of system into place where we no longer have cash, that this will give the governments of the world immense control over the economic system and over our lives, and so he and many others are concerned about that. Of course, it may seem more convenient, and I think there's studies out that show that if we do go to a completely cashless system, that this will boost the economic productivity of the world and things like that. So there are benefits to it, but the Bible warns of this this mark of the beast, where you can't work, you can't buy things, you can't participate in the economic system without whatever this mark is, and so that would sort of coincides with a cashless society kind of economic system.
Well, do you think that the people behind this are knowingly driving towards this kind of outcome, or do you think that it is like a legitimate attempt in achieving peace and unity across the world?
Yeah. I've interviewed a number of people that are federalists or globalists, and they truly believe that this would be a wonderful thing, and have the best. The vast majority, I would assume, have the best, most altruistic motives, and believe this would be truly good for humanity. And so the way we describe this in the book is, it doesn't really make sense that over thousands of years that all these people could sort of conspire together to try to pull this off. This is just not logical. But the Bible talks about spiritual forces, demonic forces that influence humanity. And so if that's truly the case, and polls show a large percentage of the population believe in angels and demons and that kind of thing. If that's truly the case, and they do have some kind of impact on our thoughts, can influence us in ways, then it makes more sense over a period of thousands of years that if the devil truly exists and the Bible's correct, then this is sort of the behind the scenes power structure that's predominant in our world, that's moving us towards this system.
Well, aside from maybe the spiritual warfare aspect of it, who do you believe are the major players currently that are behind all of this movement?
So we delve into that quite a bit in the book. Of course, many people have heard of the Bilderberg Group. Freemasons. Yale University has this Skull and Bones secret society that the various presidents and secretaries of states are members of. You have Bohemian Grove, which is a secret society where world leaders get together in Northern California in the redwoods, and they have some kind of strange cult kind of ceremony. And then of course you have the grand conspiracy theory or society, the Illuminati, and so people are very curious about is the Illuminati real? Does it still exist? And we delve into that in the book.
Well, and perhaps you could elaborate on the Illuminati a little bit. I haven't actually had an episode on that, though it's one of my long-term goals maybe. But can you kind of give a brief explanation of what they are and what they're about?
Okay, well, here's sort of my interesting link to this is I'm a descendant of Friedrich von Schiller. He's a famous German poet and playwright, lived in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And he wrote the poem Ode to Joy that Beethoven set to music in the Ninth Symphony, which is it's now the anthem of the European Union. And some people believe it'll be the sort of the theme song or the anthem of the New World Order, if and when this is put in place. He sort of catapulted to fame in the late, I think it was 1780s, wrote a play called The Robbers, and it was a big hit in Germany. And so he became a famous writer. And then within a couple of years, he had spent all his money and he was broke. And this member of the Bavarian Illuminati, which is this brand new Enlightenment era secret society, befriended him, and they knew he was a literary genius and wanted to they gave him a place to live for several years. They paid off all his debts, took care of him, and that's when he wrote Ode to Joy. And then his plays. I talked to some Schiller scholars. Pretty much most major colleges have German studies departments, and you'll have scholars on Schiller. They celebrated his 250th anniversary of his birth here a few years ago, and I think it was like a major German television station. They took a poll, and people voted him the second greatest playwright in Europe after Shakespeare. So Schiller scholars told me they believe that some of his plays may have helped inspire the French Revolution. And so after the French Revolution, he was aghast at all the people beheaded and killed, and he sort of he became sort of disillusioned with this secret society that Goethe was a member, and then royalty and literati and wealthy people, and this is primarily centered in it was the University of Ingolstadt, University of Jena in Germany initially. And so towards the end of his life, he was writing a play that was going to supposedly expose the plans of the Bavarian Illuminati. And then he died mysteriously. He was 45, and the official cause of death was tuberculosis and some other ailments. But there were widespread rumors at the time that he was poisoned. And then, he was hastily buried in the middle of the night in a mass grave. In fact, there's been questions about whether we actually had his bones for a couple centuries now, and German officials recently exhumed his casket and did some DNA samples on the bones, and I guess they have samples of his hair, and so they compared the DNA, and they also exhumed his children remains, and it turns out that the bones they have in the casket are not his at all, and so we have no idea where his remains ended up. So there's always been this mystery and this intrigue about this. And when I was little, my grandma, she told me all about him. She told me these stories that supposedly he angered the powers that be, and they killed him, and so she sort of developed planted the seed of interest in it. So when I ran across this a few years ago, sort of in an interview I was a reporter at the LA Daily News, and I was doing an interview, and this he happened to mention was this big celebration in Europe of Schiller's 250th birth. So I Googled it, and I saw all these stories, and then I ran across my co-author's website, and he had spent several decades investigating Bible prophecy and secret society and the linkage, and that sort of, I went to the prophecy conference and heard him speak, and that sort of began this whole journey and investigation.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So that's sort of, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So that's sort of my family connection and knowledge of this. And so as I did this investigation, I really wanted to dig into this. I wanted to find out, did the Illuminati kill my grandfather? And so I started digging into it, and of course, there's no way to find out for sure. But I interviewed different Schiller scholars, and they said, well, yeah, Troy, he wrote a lot of plays that were very controversial, and Hitler banned his plays, and Napoleon banned his plays at different times, and because they were because his writings encouraged revolutions essentially. Abraham Lincoln loved Schiller, campaigned for president, quoting Schiller. There's many Schiller supporters that supported Lincoln. In fact, I found out there was like 250,000 German Americans who fought on the northern side in the Civil War, including several generals. And then, ironically, Lincoln's assassin, Wilkes Booth, he actually played in a Schiller play called The Robbers, and then ironically, kills Lincoln. So there's all these sort of strange connections and such. But anyway, so I really dug into all this, and what it's a historical fact that the Illuminati actually existed for about a decade in the late 1700s, and then as the story goes, this messenger was taking a bunch of documents from Adam Weishaupt, who was the founder of Bavarian Illuminati. He was taking some documents to somebody else, and supposedly he got struck by lightning and killed, and they found his body, and then the authorities found all these documents on him talking about all these plans to overthrow the governments of Europe and abolish Christianity and the whole shebang, and the royalty of the time, they became alarmed. And there's all these newspaper stories that came out, and books were written about it. It was this big sensation in the late 1700s. In fact, we quote George Washington in the book. He said that that he had no doubt that the Illuminati was real and that they had actually come to America and tried to infiltrate here. And so there's quotes from and speeches and sermons from presidents at I think it was Yale and Harvard and Princeton, warning of the dangers of the Illuminati. So there's this whole big question of whether, after the German officials had banned these secret societies, did they go underground? Did they, infiltrate Freemasonry? Did they, infiltrate the royalty and the banking families and all that kind of stuff? And so there's been this question that's existed for 2 centuries now. Does it still exist? And of course, there's no smoking gun evidence, but if you put all together, which what we tried to do in this book, it's very suggestive that there are some very powerful behind the scenes kind of forces. Whether they still call themselves the Illuminati, I don't know. Of course, it's a big thing in pop culture now. You'll see the signs and the symbols and videos and Super Bowl halftimes and awards and Hollywood films. It's a big hot topic. And there's actually a University of Chicago did a poll and found that 51% of Americans believe a so-called secret cabal actually runs the world. So, while the media and academia, if you read about this, will try to make fun of it. Over half of Americans believe this is how the world really works. So, we try to put together the best evidence in the book and dig into all this.
Wow. See, that's a whole other rabbit hole I could go down for days, I'm sure. It's very interesting to me. Well, I think my audience would be upset if I didn't ask this next question. And, we've heard of prophetic realizations that we're about to come to end times before. What makes your findings different in the Babylon Code from some of the other predictions we've heard?
Yeah, so most people are aware that there's been literally probably thousands of predictions over the last 2,000 years that this was the end, and pretty much every generation there's been writers and people with supposed prophetic gifts that believe that this was the end of humanity, and so we cite some of these examples in the book. Of course, we don't come out and say the book that we believe this is it. Only the Bible is very clear that only God knows when this is going to happen. But Jesus did tell us to watch for the signs. And so, what the argument we make in the book is that, like I mentioned before, these 2 major ones: the rebirth of Israel and this push for globalism. And another big thing that's happening now is that we actually have the technologies now for the first time in history to actually put this global economic system into place. We have this massive surveillance system. Now we have the internet, this push towards a cashless society, all these microchip brain implants, all these new technologies, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, all the bioengineering going on. And so if you sort of put all these things together, we have the technologies now for the first time to actually have this global system of control that the Bible talks about. So that's one of the signs. But of course, the Bible's very clear: only God knows a day and hour. And so this could be it, or maybe it's another 100,000 thousands of years away. Nobody knows for sure.
Well, and I guess that leads me to my next question of the Bible basically says, in the book of Revelations, all of these things are going to happen no matter what. So what was your major goal or motivation for publishing this, and what do you want people to do with the information they read about in the Babylon Code?
Yeah, so the reason why we wrote this book is we wanted to, first of all, educate people about, what appears to be really happening here. And, a lot of people are maybe sort of vaguely familiar with what I'm talking about, but, probably a large percentage of the population, don't know much about this. And, so we wanted to sort of wake people up to what appears to be happening. When I interviewed Billy Graham, he said that, so he believed all these things were really happening now. And he compared America to ancient Nineveh. Which he said was the lone superpower of its time. And he said when God sent the prophet Jonah to Nineveh to warn them of judgment, the king and the people repented and turned to God, and then judgment was averted. And so Billy Graham said that there's examples in the Bible of if people wake up and they turn back to God and repent, that essentially I don't know how this exactly works, but I guess these events eventually will happen, as the Bible predicts, but I guess it would be forestalled or moved down the prophetic timeline or something like that. So humanity has free will. We can choose our own destiny to a certain extent, and so there's examples of this in the Bible. So that's so my co-author Paul McGuire, he the last chapter he talks about a vision that he had. He said that he and his wife were talking on the 4th of July back in 2012 maybe, and all of a sudden he felt like his body started like getting really hot. He said he felt like he was on fire. He said it was literally like he was on fire, but there's no damage to his body. And then he talked about this being taken up into the atmosphere, and he could sort of see over all of America from like a satellite view. And he said he saw like this like illumination of light slowly moving from the West Coast across the country, and he saw all these people praying for America. And he said as the light went across the country, he saw all these faces, all these praying, and he believed that what God showed him is that if the church, primarily the church, if the church would sort of stop playing church, and Christians would do what we're supposed to do and really repent of our own sins, that God could send another end time great awakening. We've had several great awakenings in our last few centuries. That could happen if we as the believers would do what we're supposed to do and stop living hypocritical lives and that kind of thing. And then this revival could eventually spread throughout the entire world. So that's the vision he believed that God gave him, and so that's one of the messages we wanted to convey with this book, that there is still hope, and so we're just trying to we felt led to try to get this message out, and so that's the the primary motivation for writing the book.
Well, it's funny, recalling the events in the book of Revelation. Obviously, there's some pretty disastrous things that happen, things that no one would ever look forward to. But have you run across anyone who's had the mindset of like, well, why would I want to prevent that? Why don't I want to just go through it so I can be with God?
Well, yeah, the great hope of the Christian faith is the second coming of Jesus, is the return of Jesus. The Bible talks about, despite that all these terrible things will happen during this 7-year tribulation period, at the end of this, God will, Jesus will create a new earth, a new heaven, and people that they accepted the Lord, will live in eternity in heaven, and the ultimate, the real utopia, a true utopia. And so that's the great hope of our faith. But Jesus also told us, our primary job on earth is the Great Commission, is to take the gospel throughout the entire world. And there's still obviously, billions of people that haven't heard the gospel. And, so our job as believers is to, spread the message. And, so while, it's true, there's probably many Christians that are, sort of disillusioned with the way the world is going, and, they hope that they get raptured and get taken out of here. But that's not what Jesus told us to do. He told us to spread the word, and, if we have to make sacrifices, it's a time for being brave and courageous, and not just, pulling away from the world and, hoping for that we'll get zapped out of here any minute now.
Well, Troy, I really want to be respectful of your time. Before we sign off here, where can people go to learn more about the Babylon Code and about you and any of your other upcoming projects?
Okay. Yeah, so I have a website. It's troyanderson.us. And then my co-author, Paul McGuire, his website's paulmcguire.us. And then, you can get the book on Amazon or pretty much any Christian bookstore, Barnes & Noble, christianbooks.com. It's pretty much all over the place. And the paperback's coming out October 4th, And we're actually in initial talks with several Hollywood producers. One's an Academy Award-winning producer. Another one owns a big Christian film company. And another one's a talent agency in Hollywood to turn the book into either a feature film or a TV series and maybe a documentary. So those sort of initial stages. So there may be a film or a TV series coming sort of loosely off our journey of investigating all this. And so look forward to that.
Well, I certainly do. Let me know. Please keep in touch, and I can share with my audience anything about that comes out. I've had a really great time speaking with you, and just want to say, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I want to send a big thank you to Troy Anderson for this thought-provoking conversation. If you've been liking the show, please feel free to leave an iTunes review or come on my website and leave a comment at deviatus.com. You can find all of this episode's show notes at deviatus.com/Anderson. And as usual, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at DeviatusPod, or look for our Facebook page. Thanks again for joining us this week. You have a great one.